сегодня, уважаемые коллеги. Прошу прощения, нам немножко пришлось задержаться. Я всех приветствую. Не всем удалось добраться до нашего мероприятия, хотя очень много желающих. Но вы знаете, что сегодня формат и статус участников Гайдаровского форума, он достаточно высокий, поэтому есть определенные ограничения. Но, тем не менее, будем надеяться, что люди все-таки, которые попозже войдут, они потом у нас появятся. Итак, уважаемые коллеги, у нас сегодня формат нашей экспертной дискуссии, который называется «Цифровое здравоохранение. Будущее наступило, уже наступило или еще не наступило». Мы сегодня, у нас есть плановые выступления, но мы очень надеемся, что после того, как мы закончим нашу обязательную программу,
finish our mandatory schedule, we will come up with about 15 to 20 minutes in order to ask questions and discuss the problems that we have, and maybe some may have suggestions about how one should develop the system of digital healthcare in Russia. When currently we're talking about digital healthcare, usually we mean utilizing digital technologies to solve healthcare problems, specifically mobile devices that users are having, the biosensors and whatnot. Please, could you project the picture on the screen, if possible? This visual quotes the forecast of the Google technical director, the well-known futurologist Ray Kurvitz, who says that I selected from all of his soothsayings only the things relating to what we're talking about, what we should expect within the next 20, 30 years in healthcare. And so, with this in mind, the futurologists, they somehow assist us in choosing the path for our development, technologies, the thinking, which are the most important for the consumers, for the participants, and for the society. And whenever today we're talking about digital health or about the digital healthcare, we understand that this is a colossal locomotive in improving the efficiency of the healthcare system. If we take a look about 15 to 20 years ago, we will see that our life has been dramatically changing every 5-7 years. Whatever took us for 15 years to happen, it was very difficult for us to predict what we're going to have today, how we'll be able to survive without the smartphone, mobiles, internet, and whatnot. And apparently, the acceleration of such a development in many ways is related to digitalization coming, because it comes everywhere. And so today, the government, the public, pay a lot of attention to developing digitalization in all industries and specifically in healthcare. It is not accidental that Elena Boyko, and she's running a bit late and she will come later, she has been appointed to the position of the Deputy Minister of Healthcare in Russia, specifically supervising digital healthcare as a topic, underscoring the fact that the healthcare system is perceived by the regulator to work on it as a separate area, and we do acknowledge that this is happening. And I would like to say that today in attendance we have different participants representing the government, representing the payers. We also have the representatives of the medical community and health professionals and the industry representatives, of course. So it is very important for us to be able to tell each other of the things that we are having, and the government and the regulators will define the path into the future development, while the industry, within the projects that they're currently working on, within the framework of the help that they can provide the healthcare system with, they will be able to make their proposals and ideas known. Nevertheless, let me quote a few statistics. Since 2015 until now, the number of applications, mobile apps, has grown by 153,000 over the past 3 years. While in 2018, 318,000 new apps have been registered specifically for healthcare application. In the first half of 2017 only, 188 companies which are developing applications invested $3.5 billion into them. A few more statistics: 80% of healthcare professionals, and this is international data, stated that they use smartphones and medical applications for their everyday work, and 72% of healthcare professionals today have stated that on a regular basis they gain access to information about pharmaceutical drugs utilizing the resources provided to them by their smartphones. So whenever we talk about the digital healthcare today, we can say that effectively digital healthcare is present one way or another at all of the stages that patients go through wellness management. You are familiar with the humongous number of applications currently in existence that is aimed at preventing diseases and supporting patients in modifying their way of life, risk factors, prevention, and so on and so forth. Next, the need for healthcare aid assists patients to control their interaction with the healthcare system. And here we may recall the cooperation between the patient and the doctor and the doctor, and simply patient to patient. The digital technologies from the point of view of healthcare aid help one to fill in the gaps in healthcare, particularly where there is a low-density population in rural areas where quite often you don't have a well-developed healthcare infrastructure. The next point, diagnostics. A doctor today can recommend using certain programs or devices equipped with sensors in order to identify early identification or diagnosis of various diseases. In itself, control over disease, training patients in self-control and self-assessment is amongst the applications which help us today to monitor the state of health of a patient and the efficacy of the treatment, and quite clearly that there are a number of applications aimed specifically at maintaining treatment, helping one to control the efficiency, providing services to find pharmaceutical products, separate applications, the drug calculators. There are smart devices such as, for example, pen syringes which dose the amount of drug applied, and so globally it all promotes compliance on the part of the patients in looking and requesting healthcare aid, dealing with the doctors and the administration of pharmaceutical products, which improves the overall quality of healthcare. So whenever we talk about the onslaught of digitalization into healthcare, we definitely should mention separately, I'm sure that it will be mentioned later on, I mean that the digital healthcare and IT technologies arrive into pharma and medical products from the point of view of developing new drugs, as well as from the point of view of new medical devices, and of course in strengthening the collaboration between patients and doctors through the devices that are being used today, which eventually would enable one to arrive at a situation when one would be in a position to control the efficacy of a treatment applied to a specific patient, the efficiency of a specific drug, and in this case, invariably, we will arrive at what we have been talking about for so long, patient-centric healthcare service. And that is exactly why I believe that we are aware of the importance that currently the government is trying to work on as a topic. But this is not only the problem of the government. This is the problem that all of those involved in healthcare service do face. And I believe that the proposals and ideas that we will hear today will demonstrate the diversity of views and opinions, but at the same time, the targets that we're trying to achieve while developing digital healthcare as a topic. So the first intervention I would like to propose to be made by Vladimir Zelensky, who is director of the City Mandatory Medical Insurance Fund. How to make digital technologies useful to the healthcare system, to patients. What is the extent to which Vladimir Anatolyevich you believe the technologies that we're currently trying to introduce, that big number of them, are they not excessive for the system? Are they not saturating the system in such a way so that the ultimate objective, rather, the introduction of the digital technologies will displace the ultimate objective that we're all trying to work for? Yes, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Basically, I am going to run by my slides, but let me also speak on my own behalf. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And it is true that if AI technology is excessive in any way, it won't generate any usefulness. And I believe that one of the problems in introducing information technologies in healthcare is that either, with respect to the current processes and management practices, the processes whereby we interact with the patients, and the life of the patient himself is what we're trying to pull on it, some sort of our own understanding of what we believe is required. And maybe this is something that people actually do not need at all. And so this is a very good example, the medical information system that have been developed and introduced, which effectively duplicated paper forms of the decrees dating back to 1980s, and a computer was effectively turned into a printing machine for healthcare professionals. Now the question is what the whole system needs and what an individual needs. So if we are to consider the healthcare system and the system of providing aid and the relationship between the patients with the healthcare institutions and the doctors as a certain competitive environment, that is exactly where we can see evolution. The struggle for a patient, struggle for quality. Patients, obviously, and I'm sure that any individual would be trying to gain as much information as possible, a well-proven information that is easy to comprehend. And that is why I believe the main goal for introducing information technologies in this or that form in healthcare or in providing healthcare aid is establishing a single communication language in the healthcare environment and the people. I'm not going to say patient because that would strongly limit the circle of those that we're talking about. People in principle, because sometimes a living doctor may lose out to Dr. Google in a competition, and so people would rather speak to Dr. Google than go and call upon a doctor. And one should bear this in mind. This is also competition for you, so all of us should adjust ourselves to this competition. Now, what else I wanted to talk about and share with you? Why, nevertheless, the system for mandatory medical insurance is what we hear about from me. I mean, the topic, which is largely should not be unrelated to the general healthcare as a system and the patients' lives in general. A major breakthrough, for example, in the United States of America, and as far as introducing the electronic healthcare records is concerned, effectively started with Medicare and Medicaid being paid in the form of a bonus for the services introduced into the medical information system. And so with Medicare and Medicaid, effectively laid the foundation of all of the standard of information exchange between health institutions, clinic, doctors, and you name it. And so currently we are talking not about billing or about invoice processing, which can continue to be done on occasions by facsimile communication. We're talking about data exchange between clinics and about the way this data is shared with a patient in an easily understandable form. Well, quite obvious that a simple person opening his medical record won't be able to understand half of what he sees in it. And that is why such data, amongst other things, should be in a palatable form to the patient. Amongst other things, what is important, and since we're talking about Russia, let's look at our mandatory medical insurance system. We collect, for many years, information about all the residents, in my case, residents in Moscow, who receive medical aid. And on this slide, you can see the amount of data that we receive annually. On behalf of 9 million patients, we receive about 500 million data points about services provided on an outpatient basis, about 2 million hospitalizations, and about 4 million emergency calls, emergency aid calls. And we have been gathering this information for many, many years. So the level of immersion is over 15 years that we go back into. And this information is structured simply because we gather this information from the billing systems. It is quite elaborate, and it contains types of services, kinds of interventions, diagnoses, etc. And so it would be quite strange not to try and use this information for the management purposes, because we, as a payer, what is our main responsibility? To procure the best quality solution, and on behalf of a citizen to verify such a quality. And on the other hand, because we are gathering information from over 500 institutions, it would also be strange for us not to share this information out with these institutions about the patients. Yes, it is not an electronic health record. But the practicality of our cooperation with the hospitals shows that, as a rule, whenever we talk about the data exchange, for example, what an ambulance requires when they go on a call, they require a certain brief. Allergies, the history, what kind of interventions took place, are there any chronic diseases? And this kind of a brief is something that we do possess, and I shall later on speak about it further, and we can share such an information. Now then. What? Yeah, 10 minutes? All right, yeah. Can I have the next slide, please? So, what else is important? Will you switch it up because my clicker doesn't work, seemingly? Right, so what else is important to us? Well, dear colleagues, I think I shall speak without the slides. Oh, right, there it is. So what else is important? We represent 12 million of Muscovites, and apart from us using information for our internal needs, we are trying to control the quality. We are fine-tuning the system for automated search for potential problems with the quality of medical aid, etc. Now, what is important? The whole world is moving towards value-based healthcare, right? This is a healthcare which is targeting the ultimate results. It is impossible in a situation with a value-based healthcare to achieve it without a human being, because the result is the state of health of a human being. And that is why it is necessary for us, on the one hand, to move towards achieving a proper feedback with the patients, and on the other hand, providing people with the information about the hospitals that they go to in order to receive aid. For that purpose, naturally, we should have well-structured data from all of the medical institutions, but let me repeat myself, something that I mentioned at the very beginning. The hospitals and the clinical institutions themselves should be aware of why it is good. You cannot force them, because any forceful pressure may lead to data manipulation and anything. So any system which is rigidly oppressed or cursed from the top makes the system adjust itself to it, and then on you need to continuously change the rules of the game, and then you get involved in an endless game with the healthcare institutions, like providing you with authentic information or non-authentic information. So what is important? We are in a position to establish this connection with the 12 million people in the example of Moscow. In 2015, we provided our citizens with an access to all of the database of services provided per specific services. Every person can see what kind of healthcare services have been requested, have been paid for. These services can be assessed, and moreover, because the mandatory medical system is being funded with the taxpayers' money, it is possible to see what it costs to the system. I mean, any particular service that has been rendered, because there's no service for free. Somebody has to pay for it ultimately. So this particular service was very much sought after, and we started improving it and updating it further. So what we're trying to do right now, apart from simply indicating services rendered, there is also a virtual pillbox service that our citizens are very much enjoying. That is where they can check compatibility of different drugs between themselves. So we provided every citizen with a certain set of places where people could store the visual files as in Dropbox exchange. And what do we anticipate to do with it in the future? Let me not dwell upon the analytics, which definitely is there, because the more data you have, the better is the quality of your management decision. Since 2018, we began introducing new way of paying for healthcare services, certain bundled payment, unified, and so to support maternity, pregnancy, and birth. The medical institution is being paid not for every hospitalization or for every call, but based on the ultimate result, a certain amount of money, and it is paid only if it performs a certain set of conditions, like the adherence of a patient to being given a service in a particular institution, and then following the standard protocol. And so on the basis of our personal account, service, we set up a messenger through which a doctor can communicate with a patient, and moreover, a doctor can see all of the services that have been provided to a patient, irrespective of the hospital that she went to. So a patient, through our secure channel, can forward the scans of various medical documents. If she took tests somewhere, she can share this information with the doctor, and the doctor, in the similar token, through this system, can maintain the schedule of calls, invite patients to come, and so a patient and a doctor, in the similar fashion, see the kind of protocol that has to be followed. So apart from the possibility of mutual data exchange on the one hand, on the other hand, we have provided both to a doctor and a patient the way to communicate with each other, not only by way of exchanging telephone number and trying to return calls all the time. At the level of the hospital institutions, we have set up a support system for the support line to such patients, because obviously not every issue requires personal attention of a doctor, because you shouldn't really distract his attention with some straightforward dietary issues. But nevertheless, we do believe that this is a very important step that we undertook. And again, why it is us, seemingly the insurance company, that is trying to get into such project, because we act as a holder of a big amount of data on the one hand. On the other hand, we can receive such data having the full authority to work with it, and that was why I started by giving the CMS example, which established the rules of information exchange between medical institutions, because one way or another, any problems in terms of the quality of service and in monitoring the patients mean additional costs for the medical insurance system, because we talk a lot about the risk modeling in the healthcare system and in the insurance risk model. It is impossible to talk about the risk model-based approach if we don't understand individual risks per an individual person. And that is not terabyte of data. There's 9 million people who have a certain healthcare need. Now, what is important for us, as I said, any transparency is a proper step towards competition. Competition is always good, particularly if we are talking about such a fine sector as healthcare, such a fine sector as pharmaceutical products. It would be wrong to let the patients drift on their own into the warm embrace of Dr. Google. We must watch out, and patients themselves need to be aware. Quite naturally, patients are able to find answers in places where it is easy for them to go, and we need to provide such answers to the patients if they have questions, or the doctors should be able to provide answers to patients' questions. So our next step is a transition, nevertheless, to a normal, somehow, control and interoperability with the patient in terms of adherence to the drug therapy, because it was not accidental. We launched this project about this drug box, pill box, because we obviously can compete with hundreds of private companies who produce similar kind of applications. The only question is that this information can be used both by doctors within the mandatory medical insurance. This information can be controlled, and patients also can be involved in it. And the last thing that we definitely should do, and we should do it together with the healthcare organizations and the healthcare professionals, we should manage an individual risk that any individual citizen is facing. It is impossible without it. If we do not change our approach to our patients, if we don't change our approach in implementing information technologies and towards the healthcare professionals themselves, we will end up having a certain administrative machine which will simply suck in all kinds of data, somehow use it for controlling functions and certain administrative practices, and nobody will see or feel the usefulness of it. So this utility must be derived from the implementation of digital technologies by everybody. We don't need to hammer in the digital nails with the digital microscope. We should use digital microscope for our own purposes, not because it is fashionable, but because we understand that that gives us a better result. Thank you very much, Vladimir Antonovich, dear colleagues. You know what I think? Because we have here in presence different participants, and each of them is doing their own business, and each of them is going to tell us about the way they see the development of digital technologies in the area that this or that representative is working in. So we will see different approaches, and certainly everybody would be talking about things which are more relevant and valuable and important in the work they do. And one should say that Moscow and Vladimir Anatolovich personally, I suppose, they are the first ones in the Russian Federation who have created the information system as part of the mandatory medical insurance, which enables one to control practically everything with respect to the insured people. And it is very great for me to say, because we're allies here, because Vladimir Anatolovich told us about the value-based healthcare, which is something that quite actively, again, Vladimir Schlichtoy was very busy with, who is our next speaker. So before we pass the microphone over to him, I would like to say that he's not only the general director of one of the prominent healthcare institutions, but also the senior cardiologist in the Ministry of Healthcare. And you know that today we have priority project, the National Project for Cardiology. And I would very much like to ask Evgeny Vladimirovich, in his brief presentation, because unfortunately, based on our agreement, our timing is in between 5, 7, 10 minutes max, for us to tell him whether he sees the possibility to apply digital technologies within the kind of national projects that the President announced and that the government is expecting us to achieve. Thank you very much, Vitaly Vladimirovich and dear colleagues, for this introduction and kind words about the work that we do. So next slide. The most important thing for us is not to drown it in words and phrases. So introducing all kinds of digital technologies to understand what is it being done for. Now, continuing the topic, which may be related to positive, negative effects of digital technologies being introduced, I would like to draw the attention of those present here to the fact that there is only one resource, which is called the electronic medical record, where we may expect and rest assured that the issues of safety, affordability, engagement, and continuation and sustainability will be observed in full. In as far as other aspects are concerned, like electronic registration office, healthcare passport, electronic recipe transfer, this all to a certain part are related to two issues, quality and accessibility. Now, speaking about the value-based healthcare, without doubt, we, in the first place, mean integrated approach, because it cannot happen any other way. From the screening, from diagnosis, from intervention, rehabilitation and monitoring. And so the only approach which enables one to put into a circle, this is digitalization of healthcare, because it is impossible to do it any other way. Next one, please. That is why, speaking about what digitalization will give us, what it will lead us to, I certainly enjoyed hearing about such approaches as to what we need to avoid in terms of what kind of negative consequences we may face if we're not careful. So the most important thing is for digitalization not to lead to the lessening of personal contact, because I believe it should be exactly the other way. So the value of such an approach is for a healthcare professional to have the possibility to communicate with the patient. So excessive formalization is very dangerous when we would entrust the quality of providing healthcare service even to the decision support systems, a various information approach, which would invariably dilute the involvement of a healthcare professional. So machine learning, artificial intellect without very clear validation and efficacy may also bring about very negative consequences. Unfortunately, many attractive services do not lead to a tangible improvement in the healthcare population. They look interesting, they're nice looking, it's all good marketing, it all sells well, but in terms of real improvement of the quality of aid, it's not happening. And so we see the examples amongst the projects that recently have come to an end in the US, where excessive control over the life of a patient using various gadgetry didn't lead to an improvement, but rather to a worsening, whereby as a result of an excessive control, depression, stress, would come. And so these are very important things that we should be aware of if we're not to train the staff and the people to introduce such technologies. That also poses a very high risk of not being able to achieve the expected results in every health institution. And finally, the inability to ration the functions and what the doctors and health professionals do in terms of the timing requirements. One should understand without changes here, digitalization will not help us. Now, where one should expect a response from? Who are going to be our partners in such an implementation? How we can achieve the low-hanging fruit in digitalization? Who should be the most interested stakeholder, the payer in it? Certainly the government, because that means better health of the population, reducing the costs. Insurance companies do come in, businesses, particularly those who manufacture pharmaceutical products and medical devices, and biotech companies, where the questions of improving competitiveness, risk sharing, retrospective predictive analytics, big data. So these are the facets that the business is interested in today. IT companies, without doubt, are very interested. This is the Internet of Things, commercialization of products, and private industry in healthcare through raising the attraction level of the services and transparency in the data area. Now, speaking about my specialty, closer to cardiology, something that Vitaly Vladimirovich was talking to, I should say that in as far as the implementation of the national healthcare projects and as far as part of it related to the cardiovascular disease is concerned, one should understand that we're facing ambitious goals, and to be able to achieve them today is something that one can only, I'll come back to the very beginning, by changing the healthcare paradigm, by really putting into the most important place the customized approach, which together with the integrated approach can alter the situation and enable us to achieve such objectives. So the issues of implementing national projects will require the expedient data being available. So this global wave of data that is available, it is impossible to digest it because visualization is necessary, and a systemic analysis at all the stages whereby the healthcare is providing, and we're moving towards this patient flow, which is the interrelationship between all of the participants in the process of providing healthcare, not just as part of the way it works out when everyone is responsible only for what he or she does. This is an emphasis upon the final home run. So the integrated mortality rate picture, because we're thinking about the cardiology atlas and various approaches towards better visualization and towards an assessment of the way the whole system works related to the cardiovascular system, as well as availability of resources, producing specific recommendations. And certainly, in order to be able to provide for an effective treatment and the prevention as well as the savings, we need to understand what is it that we should monitor. So monitoring various dietary, nutritionary, then doses of treatment, the ability for the doctors to respond to any deviations. Digitalization is very important here. And so in this sense, in St. Petersburg, we are already into that work, whereby the patient community is involved as well as the public non-government organizations are involved. And so clearly, this is something that the President was talking about. If we are not to have every citizen of the country participate in specific projects, it will be very, very difficult for us to run them. So together with Novartis, we are establishing the integrated help to those who are suffering from the heart diseases, trying to find various ways to reduce mortality related to a broad introduction of the decision-making support systems involving the family members, introducing the information-based approaches to monitoring patients, which is also related to a very active observation, as well as the consistency and timely corrections. So I believe that this project is very important in order to be able to involve into this work the category of patients which is not so obviously involved into this national project. And I should say, please, extremely important is digitalization, to create the registers. And if we're talking about cardiology, like fibrillation, cardiosurgery, implants, Vitaly Vladimirovich which really likes this work. The technology assessment, the amount of money that is paid for such technology without such registries is really very complicated. But one should also think about the scientific support for such registries, because this is not just information by itself. On the one hand, it used to be transparent, and on the other hand, it was designed per every specific situation. And that's exactly why today we're thinking about how are we to create a system of expedient information dissemination which would be permeating the healthcare system with the resources being given per every treatment. So the picture of mortality, in the picture the disease map in the cardiovascular diseases, identifying gaps and identifying proper resources. This is something that we're very much lacking today. And so by creating such a map, such a cardiology atlas, we're thinking about the building blocks which would provide us with the risk information about the resource available, the competency matrices, about what healthcare institutions do in terms of specialty high-tech medical aid, and issues of personnel and professional development, and most importantly for the system to be integrated with other services as well. With the healthcare professionals registries, the single information system, so that such a system could be integrated with the European registries, with the WHO data as well. That is why the issue of developing such a system, having it in place, comparative diagrams, trends, and ratings and rankings. So if one is to put it into one particular page, that is the way it looks in as far as the share of the patients is concerned with acute coronary syndromes. And if that's the way it goes, we will have a very liquid information about what is going on in the country. We see that there are reasons where the share of such patients is very high, in others it is very low, and it all is compatible with the resources, with funding, with the availability of professionals, and it all can be analyzed in dynamics. So I believe that if we manage within such a context to achieve digital technology implementation, I believe that would create the utmost usefulness and would be conducive to the national projects running successfully. Thank you very much, Evgeny Vladimirovich. And colleagues, it seemed to me that in two presentations that we have just heard, there was an idea expressed that digitalization, digital technologies, is not the end in itself. This is something that enables all of us to better do what we do. And actually, whenever part of what we do, we entrust to the digital technologies, we ease the work done by the healthcare professionals. We ease the life of the patients in terms of the self-monitoring needs. And the same can be applied to what the pharmaceutical companies do, and the ones which produce medical devices, which, as far as digital technologies are concerned, see there some instruments, some solutions that help them do better their work. Today, IT technologies do change the role of a patient within the R&D ecosystem. And so what happens is that whenever we talk today about how digitalization, from the point of view of developing new drugs, can manifest itself, these are two main streams: data collectability directly from patients, something which depersonifies the big data analysis in an online mode practically, and secondly, this is patient centricity. Today at this event, we have the representative of the biggest pharmaceutical companies present, and different companies, each in slightly their own way, utilize digital technologies. And I would like Patrick Bergstedt, who is the Vice President for Global Marketing in MSD company. This company is so broadly known in the world because it is actively involved in developing healthy lifestyles by changing the lifestyle of patients, by strengthening the adherence and the discipline that the patients do eschew towards the medical aid. Please, Patrick.
As I answer the question, I would really like to compliment the two previous speakers, because I think the number of points that you raised, be it either from a payer perspective or from a clinical perspective, are very relevant. When we're looking at digital technology and how do you work with platform companies from a Russian perspective, a lot of the discussions that we're having in Russia at the moment is how do we use digital technology as a way of supporting the government's objectives of improving longevity, improving the healthcare, and specifically with in mind the government's stated goals for 2024. And I'd like to say in summary that we're looking at it in terms of two big buckets. One is in terms of analytics, and the other one is in terms of efficiencies and effectiveness. And my colleagues on the panel, the experts, have alluded to some of these points. Firstly, in terms of data analytics, and this comes back to the previous speaker in terms of the point about registry. I think that if we take one of the themes of the healthcare priorities for Russia is vaccination, and there are very stated goals in terms of improving the quality and the number of vaccines that will be introduced into Russia in the next couple of years. If we could have better analytics to improve the understanding of the prevalence of disease at a local level, at a regional level, at a national level, that in turn would give us better understanding in terms of how and where to deploy coverage and care. So that could be one example. In addition to that, the quality and the control and the security of the vaccination supply chain is critical. And so serialization becomes a very important technology to ensure that the vaccine that's being delivered in Russia is authentic, that the supply chain is secure, and that the quality of vaccine being delivered at the point of care is important. In addition to that, so there would be two examples of analytics. Moving forward in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, I think, and one of the colleagues mentioned this, with better understanding of coverage rates, we have the opportunity of working with the government in order specifically to achieve vaccination goals. We know, for example, that with papillomavirus, if you can achieve high coverage rates at the local level, at the national level, and achieve the herd immunity, we have data from a country like Australia now, where they achieve extremely high coverage rates in girls and boys, and they are the first country to declare that in a few years' time, HPV-related cancers will be eliminated thanks to the introduction of vaccination. And we know that within the Russian government, that discussion is taking place. And we have to remember that about 5,000 women die in Russia from a disease that can be prevented. So I share that with you just with a couple of examples. Now, as we look at digital transformation, just to share a few things of what we're doing, we're working with companies who are fundamentally transforming healthcare. And these are companies that have no experience or no history with platform technology. In China, for example, we are working with Alibaba. And Alibaba has actually an interesting agenda because they have declared a healthcare strategy based upon health and wellness. And the concept was already mentioned that, we need to think of the patient, but more importantly, we need to think about the healthcare consumer. And it is very interesting to know that, from a global survey, 41% of people who were surveyed said that social media influences how they make healthcare decisions. In addition to that, within that survey, 18 and 24-year-olds, 90% of 18 and 24-year-olds said that they trust what they read in social media concerning healthcare. In addition to that, many people say that, well, actually 91% of people use online communities as a way of influencing where they go for healthcare. So can you imagine if you are now at a government that's rolling out a new national healthcare program, and many of the people in your ecosystem are actually highly influenced by what may not necessarily be accurate information. That puts your program at huge risk. So what we are seeing is companies actually play a very important role in supporting education of healthcare professionals, creating awareness and education amongst patients and consumers. And this also becomes very important from a vaccination perspective, where people start doubting, questioning, and are hesitant about vaccination. It is amazing that in today's world, in 2019, we actually have people who question whether they should personally get vaccinated or whether they should vaccinate their children. And this is often as a result of misinformation. So as we think about the strategy, particularly from a Russian perspective, is we need to think about how do we use technology as an enabler. I agree with my colleagues, which is that it should not be a substitute, but it should complement, and in fact, in some cases, could be a triage to help the healthcare system. It is stated that in 2030, the world will be short of 5 million physicians. And this is because not only of the growing birth rate in a number of countries, but also the aging population, which actually is putting more and more burden on the healthcare system. Last but not least, I would make mention of the fact that within Russia, we are working with a company called Culvert 22 on a healthy living program in order to, once again, within the ecosystem, and I think this is important when we think of the world of digital, it's no longer just a physician or a scientist or a payer or a politician. The world is all connected. And I think this is the power of digital technology, which is, once again, how do we better understand our marketplace? Where are the efficiencies? Where are the inefficiencies? And then how together work with our ecosystem to develop communities where people can exchange information, collaborate together at a scientific level, at a clinical level, and ensure that the quality of information that is delivered to the patients and the consumers that we serve is indeed authentic, it's reliable, and trustworthy. Thank you for the opportunity.
Спасибо большое, Патрик.
Oh, thank you very much, Patrick. Dear colleagues, here with us, we have also a managing director of Janssen Company on the EMEA, Luis Diaz Rubio. And one should say that Johnson & Johnson is very actively introducing digital technologies from the point of view of developing pharmaceutical products. And I believe that there's not another company today which can afford to avoid introducing such technologies. However, Johnson & Johnson was the first one to actively use it. And I would like to ask Luis to tell us about this and possibly about certain other technologies which you use in your business. Thank you.
I think that is going to work well. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the previous speakers. I think that all interventions are really in the right direction, and I am really glad to hear these proposals and these approaches, because if we acknowledge something when it comes to the digital transformation in healthcare, is that no one single stakeholder or institution can really make a big difference alone. I think that we all see that we are living in fascinating times. The healthcare is being transformed itself, and digitalization is one of the big enablers, but not the only one. And when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry and a company like us, like Janssen, as part of the Johnson & Johnson family, we see really digitalization really changing the way we work all across our value chain. In one of the key questions of the debate was if digitalization might not make sense in some areas of healthcare, and I have been reflecting about that question, and my clear answer to that question is that's not the case. Digitalization is, in my view, going to affect every single process and every single space when it comes to healthcare. For a company like ours, it's changing the way we do R&D, it's changing the way we do supply chain, and for sure it's changing as well the way we commercialize our drugs. Maybe I would like to point out to three different dimensions. Some of them have already been discussed in the panel. The first one is an acknowledgement that data is the new currency, and we need to understand how the tsunami of new data that we are all connecting can help us to really deliver a higher productivity on what we do. In our case, our main objective and our main task is to develop and research drugs. And on that, we do clearly see an acceleration in drug development, and we do see also that we are coming with better drugs, with more targeted drugs, thanks to new technologies and thanks to data. I would like to, for example, mention the central nervous system space and diseases like Alzheimer or depression, where the endpoints of the studies are not as clear as maybe in other therapeutic areas. The diagnostics tools are not as precise maybe as in other therapeutic areas, and gathering new data is a must nowadays. And for example, things like language processing, natural language processing is going to help us, and it's helping us already to diagnose some of the diseases earlier and to intervene at the right time. When it comes to data, real-world evidence is a big topic for us. We do need to better characterize patient journeys, and we need to better understand the different segments and the different populations when it comes to developing tailor-made approaches to patients. We do believe that when it comes to data, electronic data records and unified systems that can interoperate is critical. On that we are very much willing to partner with healthcare authorities and with different institutions. And we do believe that for that, trust is indispensable. Without trust, very difficultly we are going to really evolve on that regards. Maybe the second big dimension that has already been partially covered as well is personalized treatment. And we do believe that, of course, big data, artificial intelligence, advanced analytics should play a big role on that. And it's not just about customizing drugs that are going to be delivered for each patient at each time, but it's also to better understand which kind of care and follow-up each patient needs. So our dear colleague Eugenie was talking about maybe digital sometimes, and some of these apps maybe having the opposite effect that for what they were intended. For example, the examples in the US, maybe patients are looking at the wrong way about their own diseases, and we do believe that it is very much about customizing solutions for different target groups and really putting a lot of emphasis in measuring outcomes. So it cannot be that anyone can deliver, an app, and the following day this app is considered a new standard for example, to follow up patients. We in pharma, and specifically in Janssen, we do see ourselves not just delivering product, but delivering solutions, and we are coming more and more with complementary diagnostic tools, and we are coming more and more with apps and with patient support programs that really can help us to take an end-to-end care of patients in need. A very important aspect for us on that trend is to consider patient preferences. So the system, the public healthcare system, or pharma company like ours, we cannot decide for the patient, and patient preferences in terms of what matters the most in terms of their quality of life and other indicators need to be considered whenever we discuss personalized medicine. And maybe the third dimension that I would like to refer to is the aspect of the huge opportunity to increase productivity in the system, to reduce waste, to reduce inefficiencies, and to really concentrate in measurable and valuable outcomes, very much along the lines of value-based healthcare. That requires a lot of chain management from everyone in the system, particularly in the healthcare providers, in the healthcare professionals. I would like to emphasize the importance of ensuring that everyone in the healthcare ecosystem truly understand what is in need for them, and we all align and create the right incentives for all stakeholders, for everyone to embrace the digital transformation agenda and really take the best out of it. And more reflecting about our own experience, for example, at Johnson & Johnson, at Janssen, where, as you can imagine, we discuss almost every day about how can we ingrain digital capabilities with do things that is more about inspiring individuals, and as someone said this morning, about learning how to learn rather than to go to conventional trainings. This is not the right way to go when it comes to really building these unique capabilities. And let me finish by saying that we do believe that Russia is very well positioned in this journey. The level of professionalism when it comes to the tech industry in Russia is rather high. We see also the political intent and the target on pursuing digital transformation very well set. And a company like ours, like Johnson & Johnson, we are very much willing to partner with institutions along the healthcare ecosystem to really make the difference for patients in the long term. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Луис.
Thank you very much, Luis. Dear colleagues, Novartis, as a company at the level of its European community, has initiated the Commission for the Stable Development of the Digital Healthcare. This Commission, in its resolution, has defined the basic elements of the digital healthcare as a system. First of all, the national healthcare system, respectively changed regulatory environment, and various healthcare information systems. So one should say that nowadays in Russia we also experience such problems, because you might know that today the mobile technologies are not being registered in any way. And something that Evgeny Vladimirovich mentioned earlier, that in certain situations mobile technologies may be detrimental to the life of patients. So the issue that we're facing today is that whether such mobile systems ought to be registered somehow. So in FDA today we know that there are certain medical guidelines, and the European Medical Agency has prepared guidelines as well in terms of how to categorize medical and mobile application from the point of view of a possible risk and from the point of view of their subsequent registration. However, until now in Russia no mobile applications or systems are being registered. And up till now, most probably, they are in the category of the medical devices, the registration of which is supervised by the Russian Healthcare Oversight Agency. Recently in Russia, there was a big roundtable held on the topic of digital healthcare, where in the agenda there was an item whether the services which currently are responsible for registering medical devices, whether they should register medical technologies of the digital nature. And so this is another point which we should deal with as part of the regulatory development. Nevertheless, we have the Global Director for Legal and Corporate Issues representing Novartis company, the company which is actively supporting the work of the above-mentioned Commission. And I would like to ask Shannon Timeklinger to say a word and share with us her vision about this and other issues as well. Thank you.
So thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about what we believe is the immense potential that lies within digitalization to shape the healthcare sector, not just now, but for the coming years and the coming decades. As with many of my fellow panelists, we believe that digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, mobile health, and e-health applications, have the potential to unlock how we do novel drug discovery, and not just on discovery, but also on development and ultimately the delivery to patients. We believe that these new e-health technologies will enable the collection, integration, and aggregation of healthcare data more rapidly and at scale, creating the possibility to significantly improve people's lives and offering potential efficiency gains to healthcare systems, which will continue to be important in the years to come. We also see tremendous opportunity for e-health and mobile health in the area of chronic disease, and has been mentioned by many of my fellow panelists earlier, ensuring and equipping patients with the right information for both their own treatment, but also to share with healthcare systems and physicians to ensure that there is quality continuum of care and compliance when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Novartis recently had the opportunity to co-chair a working group of the Broadband Commission for the Sustainable Development on Digital Health. And we asked, as part of that working group, from a policy perspective, what would be required in order to have a functioning digital healthcare system? Several themes emerged that I think are also relevant as we think about the future of digital healthcare here in Russia. One was that we need a well-defined and comprehensive national digital healthcare strategy. We've seen all of the stakeholders who have spoken already today, and there are many more who aren't on this stage today who need to partner together to ensure the delivery of an effective digital healthcare strategy. We also need an appropriate regulatory framework, and was alluded to, things like digital therapeutics and many digital tracking devices are still, people still struggle with, how do we approve them? Are they drugs? Are they medical devices? Are they applications? I'll talk a minute about a digital therapeutic that we recently had approved in the US, but also why we see the opportunity for more digital interventions that are solutions that go beyond the pill. We also think that to accompany an effective digital healthcare system, there needs to be a transparent medical information system. It needs to be integrated, as has been referenced earlier, and I couldn't agree more that trust is key in any successful medical information system to assure, as I mentioned earlier, effective and continuous treatment of a patient, both in the inpatient setting, but also in the outpatient setting. For us, and we very much want to be part of this discussion in Russia and elsewhere, we believe that it requires, again, the involvement of many stakeholder groups, including policymakers, citizens, patient groups, healthcare professionals, systems and insurers, scientists, companies like ours, everyone who has a stake in seeing more efficient healthcare, more affordable healthcare, and better outcomes needs to come to the table. When we think about digital health at Novartis, this has been a key focus for us in 2018. Indeed, we talk about Novartis as a digitally enabled medicines company that works to reimagine medicine to improve and extend people's lives. In November of 2018, our generics division, Sandoz, had approved in the US for the first time a product called Reset in partnership with Pear Therapeutics. This is the first digital therapeutic approved in the United States, and it's approved for the treatment of opioid abuse disorder. It works by both ensuring that patients who work with their physician and this application reduce their dependency on the abused substance, but also through the use of interactive videos, constant access to support systems and counselors, text, audio, and videos. We've shown clinically that we improve outcomes and reduce relapse in patients who have opioid addiction. This is just one example from our perspective as to how drug development will continue to move into the digital space, in addition to all of the other things that we've talked about already today. Another way that we're leveraging digital technology builds a bit on what we've also heard from our colleagues in terms of drug development. We've worked very hard to create an artificial intelligence environment around our clinical trial programs. We call this the SENSE project, which helps us monitor in real time how our clinical trials are progressing for new and innovative molecules. SENSE combines huge volumes of data in one place and supports our clinical studies by predicting, is a study on time? Do we see issues from a safety and monitoring perspective? And what can we do to course correct in the middle of the study, both to ensure a successful conclusion of that study, more quickly bringing innovative medicines to the people who need them, but also ensuring, again, that we conduct our clinical trials in a way that fully respects patient safety. SENSE also allows us to get our drugs to market more quickly and more effectively and more cost effectively. And I think we can all agree that cost effectiveness in the context of national healthcare is a debate and a discussion all of the stakeholders in digital healthcare will need to continue to have. When we think about what we're doing already here in Russia, it's not too dissimilar from my colleagues at other pharmaceutical companies. We're very focused on using digital to provide education to physicians and to patients, particularly in areas like oncology and cardiology, and to make sure we're connecting doctors from different parts of this incredible country to ensure that they're sharing clinical experiences and improving the outcomes of patients wherever they are. The idea is to ensure the accurate transmission of information, whether you're in a big city with big hospitals and great academic research centers, whether you're more in the provinces. How do we ensure high quality and an equal standard of healthcare wherever our patients are? We also have allowed the development of targeted modules that, if we can find a way to integrate our data into the regional health information systems, can allow us to track patients with heart disease and other high burden diseases, doctor to doctor, location to location, again, ensuring that they're compliant with their medications and hopefully improving outcomes. We look at artificial intelligence when it comes to imaging for breast cancer and looking at mammograms to better accelerate appropriate diagnosis and appropriate treatment. We believe this will impact survival rates and increase the quality of care we give to these women who need it. And finally, we're collaborating with St. Petersburg City on the development of a medical information system that will enable structured cardiovascular data collection, analysis, and decision-making, as was mentioned earlier. For us, Russia is a fantastic place to do business because we are very pleased to see that digital health has been on the Russian government's agenda in the last years. We welcome, for example, the achievements of the Internet Initiatives Development Fund, especially when it comes to the Semantic Hub Initiative, which was funded by IIDF. For us, this initiative, which we believe helps R&D experts in pharmaceutical companies accelerate the identification of promising developments, including new targets, new molecules, new combinations, and new delivery systems, will reduce the risk of failures and bring, again, drugs quicker to the people who need them. We also welcome the establishment of the ambitious federal project, Establishment of the Unified Digital Circuit in Healthcare, based on Unified State Health Information System. And that's been alluded to already before, the importance of unified health data. For us, a key element of this project is to link all medical organizations by 2023 to the digital circuit to allow for the fullest information exchange and access to digital services in the healthcare sector to all Russian citizens by 2024. We believe that the Russian healthcare system will greatly benefit from the development of integrated medical information systems that will allow the effective tracking of patients with appropriate clinical data linked to it. Such systems, we believe, can become the basis for the establishment of best-in-class systems to support decision-making for doctors in accordance with national clinical guidelines. For us, e-health and digital innovation will continue to be important areas that should further be explored and used to address the common challenges that we all face due to an aging population, the rise of chronic diseases, and the resulting increased cost for healthcare systems. We believe that if resources are made available and an adequate framework built, all sides, both the public and the private sector, but most importantly, the patient, will win. We stand ready to contribute and partner with the Russian government in this regard and look forward to working together to create a unified, effective, and efficient health information system, both at the federal and the regional level, for the benefit of patients. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Шеннон.
Thank you very much, Shannon. I would like to categorically agree with you when you are saying that Russia is a fantastic place. It is truly a fantastic place to introduce not only digital technologies, but also for the global improvement of quality of healthcare. Dear colleagues, we have amongst us Senior Vice President at the head of the Philips in Russia, the CIS in Russia, Maxim Kuznetsov. And I would like to say that traditional from the point of view of regulatory issues, it is believed that the companies which manufacture medical devices, they're slightly lagging behind from the traditional pharma, which has conventionally been believed to be more advanced, more regulated. However, from the point of view of digital technologies, one should say that medical devices and the company which produces medical devices, I believe over the past 40 years, have actively been using different information systems to provide for the operation of its equipment, separate registration, which they register together with their equipment. And it is very difficult today to imagine any medical device without respective digital technologies, digital processing. And so, Maxim, please, say a word. Yes, so it means that I'm the last speaker on this panel. I see. All right, I will try and be as brief as possible. Hello, and I suppose it's good to be the final speaker because I was able to listen to all of my previous colleagues and hear what different industries think. And to my mind, it is worthwhile mentioning that Philips has a very diverse kind of business in this country, consumer business, and consumers are the ones who actively work with young mothers through the Avent brand. There are many mothers who use our application, and to a certain extent, there is also a certain element of digital healthcare because we help them to do the proper breastfeeding, and there are certain points of contact between the medical business and consumer business in our portfolio. But going back to the original topic, whether the future is now, I believe that it is becoming very much now. And that is what I believe. Based on the survey that Philips is doing every year, including in Russia, 12% of healthcare professionals have assessed the current system of healthcare as digitalized. So the question was, can you describe the current system well digitalized? And we see that it's not a big value. The average European value, just by for comparing sake, about 30%. So there are things to be done more. But at the same time, 85% of respondents stated that they are confident that the further integration of IT solutions would enable the system to increase its throughput as well as improve the quality of healthcare to patients. And I do say that it is not without reason that we are involved in such a discussion with the representative of the expert committee, because unequivocally there is a lot of potential for us to develop in this area. Similarly, I would like to say that Philips is very much welcoming the efforts done consistently by the government in developing digital healthcare, because we do see that the single digital framework is being developed. We'll also see a sub-program of the national digital healthcare. We do see that various elements are being connected for a future, very powerful future platform that would enable the country to undertake a big quality and very important produce product both for the patients and for the doctors. That is something that we view as a very positive signal, and we're very much supportive of it. Next slide, please. Yes. Philips in Russia has a laboratory. We have a laboratory in the Skolkovo Innovation Center, which is unfortunately, I've got only two hands now. Sorry. Yes. So Philips has a laboratory which is developing IT products, including the products with artificial intellect. And these products are aimed at providing clinical decision-making support. If we understand the practice, the current framework in many ways touches upon the administration system, like Vladimir said, the accounting, additional supervision and control. So the things that we're working on in Russia, including in the Skolkovo laboratory, at support in enabling decisions for the healthcare professionals, effective management of healthcare institution operation, and different instruments like the digital photomorphology, very much sought after as part of the implementation of the decree number 2024 in the assessment of the oncological diseases. It is going to be very much in demand. Next slide, please. This slide shows a certain solutions that our company is working with, and the ones that we are developing in the Russian market, including with the IT laboratory located at Skolkovo. And so here what I would like to say is that the digital ICU, which using artificial intellect within the next 2 to 3 hours may help us to predict that a human being may end up being in a critical situation based on the sensors that provide the reading of the current state of health of a patient. And so taking also into account the time spent in ICU, the medications that are being administered, automation, and the customization of the process whereby an individual is maintained in ICU. The digital morphology is quite surprising even now, but primarily the an assessment of glosses in the amongst oncological patients are being done with the help of a microscope and a specialist eye. It's really great, but there are already available solutions whereby a digital camera and a digital scanner, as a minimum, can provide us with a second opinion instantly, and on the basis of a selection, of quite a broad selection, provide with a certain advice. This is also a certain additional help that pathologists can really very much enjoy. And I'm sure that patients should also enjoy being able to gain a much better quality. Then the Center for the Visual Processing, we all remember individual situations where we had to go through an MRI scan. Today, artificial intellect makes it possible to assess your MRI scan instantly, prompting a doctor to take a specific look at certain areas, specific areas. And these are, I believe, very important elements which may help to really improve the clinical throughput as well as improve the quality of the services provided, something that we mentioned in the very beginning of our today's discussion, because accelerating these processes should not end up in diminishing the quality of the aid given to a patient. We can go over to the next slide, and this is a slide where I wanted to show, well, clearly the market is going at a very high pace, and the digital technologies are ever expediently moving, but there are certain tangible gaps in the discussion that we are engaging ourselves with the representatives of the government, because not all answers to the questions are on the surface. I've quoted a few of them, like intellectual property, concessions, respectively, as well as transfer of data, an IP framework. So whenever we move from the area of devices into the area of products or as an IT solution, there invariably appear new questions which previously haven't been attended to. Like my colleague from Janssen Company mentioned, what is it? A product, an application, what is it? So this is some sort of a new substance, a new notion, which has to be digested in a regulatory fashion. So I guess this is it. Thank you very much. This is the way I wanted to summarize, saying that the future is coming. Yes. Thank you very much. And dear colleagues, you know that indeed something that Maxim was telling us about with respect to having to change the regulatory environment is indeed the issue that we're facing, because today we have pharmaceutical products, today we have medical devices, and we also have buy-sell products. But what we don't have today is the kind of a notion that many refer to, but nevertheless in the notional sort of sphere, it is non-existent, is the word technologies, something that we quote quite often and pronounce here, be it digital technologies, be it certain ways of treatment of special nature, as well as creating new technologies which treat patients, etc., etc. Today, all of it is outside of the regulatory framework. And so the kind of challenges that digitalization, without mentioning genetics, I mean, all of it put together represents the kind of challenges that our lawyers are going to face, who will work in the healthcare system in developing this new notional framework and introducing it into the Russian law. Unfortunately, Elena Lvovna hasn't been able to make it to here. I think she was stranded by some sort of an accident on the road, but she was on her way, so she asked me to convey her apologies to it. But nevertheless, the kind of questions that we would like to raise before one another. I also have certain questions I want to direct to the speakers. So first of all, I would like to ask the audience, does anybody have a question? Please. Please. Yes. Mashkin Podolsky is my name. Good President, I have a question. Digital economy, digital transformation, and formalized data, coding, encoding. Is digital healthcare ready to use and switch over to formalized decision? Because there are such solutions in Russia. If you want, I can tell you about very specific things. So, the answer, please, give us the answer. Is there a willingness, and is there the capability, I mean, financial one, digital economy. Yes, we've got the solution, a ready one. We are ready to cooperate. Oops, I don't know whether anybody has something to say in response. Well, dear colleagues, you know, we're all familiar about a very interesting thing. If there is a technology, be it a drug, be it a digital solution, medical product, until they are implemented, they don't have any value. Their value, therapeutical value, their value for the population, for the healthcare system, emerges only when you see the real possibility of introducing it into practice. So whenever you raise such a question, because today we have a lot of different technologies being developed, however, the system is ready to introduce innovation. That is why we are here. It's a different question. Where, when, and what will be the verification requirement imposed upon the technology that you're developing? How you could verify it, how you could validate it and prove that they're cost-effective, that their introduction will bring a certain effect. So whenever we talk today about assessing technologies in healthcare, something that I mention often, I do believe that the digital technologies are amongst the kind of technologies which are necessary to assess from the point of social, medical, clinical value that they can generate, and only then try and understand how much that would cost, and whether it would be too costly, or this will be the kind of IT technology that would create savings. And only after we have these line of arguments, well, that would enable the government to make up its mind, or maybe the insurance system would help make up its mind. We have the answer to the question. We are ready to discuss it. All right, send it to us, send it to the healthcare ministry. We will think about what to do about it. Another thing, dear colleagues, are there any other questions? Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, hello. Look, I've got a question. Could you introduce yourself? My name is Valentin. I've got a question. I am a businessman. I have a feeling that our medical law is very humane, but because it is so not well sorted into a single base, there's no healthcare law as such, and that affects us and doesn't enable us to introduce something and prevents us from providing medical aid, not only regionally, but also in various locations. Is there any work done to collect into one realm, a single realm, a separate medical law? Do we have any legal people here? May I answer? May I just answer? With your permission, a very brief comment. In fact, to say that we don't have any healthcare law, it is so engaged, is not correct, because the system of regulation is as it is. There is, a level of federal laws, and there is the authority of the regions to regulate down at their level. There is also the authority of healthcare institutions and insurance institutions to regulate what they do. That is what we have. But to a big regret, and I have observed many conversations with respect to telemedicine, there is a certain expectation to the fact that if all of a sudden we change the law and will introduce the word of telemedicine into it, the starmen will fall upon us from the sky, and they will implement themselves all over the country. But in fact, there are no obstacles in many things that we're trying to do, but against the fact that our medical law is very complex, it's very, broad. Well, some of the laws may be quite outdated, but actually that provides a lot of free-hand activity. A lot. So once again, I should say that, generally speaking, in terms of the healthcare regulation, our legal system is not excessive, and that these are the thoughts of an individual who is seeing it every day. Sorry to say, you are actually quite correct, but you're mentioning telemedicine. But to introduce new technologies, there are no difficulties. I absolutely agree with that. What I meant to say is that it is so disengaged at the federal and the municipal level, because sometimes, it is contradicting each other. Well, there is some truth in what you're saying, maybe not in an absolute way, but nevertheless. But if we're talking about the healthcare system, I can tell you that the Minister of Healthcare today works on the harmonizing the existing regulatory framework. And you know that towards the end of last year in December, there was the law about clinical guidelines adopted, which in a very legislative way builds the system from clinical guidelines all the way down to the tariffs, without mentioning the criteria of quality. But of course, we do have the outdated documents, various orders and decrees dating back to the 1980s, which is certainly in a very scheduled way going to be cleaned. But that doesn't have a relation to the digital technologies, apart from the fact that the currently existing law is not ready to welcome active digitalization, so it has to be changed. So a lot of enabling in some legislations, which the Minister of Healthcare in the very near future will have to introduce. Well, with your permission, I would like to ask a question. I do not know. Maybe our foreign colleagues would share with us their international experience in case they see how this problem can be resolved. Maybe Vladimir Anatolovich was much closer to this problem today. Today we're saying that inside the healthcare system there are so many different databases. Databases about the patients on the one hand. On the other hand, on the third hand, there is a great number of very statistical forms that the healthcare institutions have to report within. All of these are the pieces of a potential big data hub, you can name it any way you want, which will gather information in the end about federation, about the regions, about a hospital, about a patient, based upon the current framework under development. So my question is this: we all want to enjoy the possibility to use this data for different analytical purposes, for forecasting, for marketing, to assess the efficiency of various technologies online, as they say. But all of these databases, they are disengaged, and maybe tomorrow there will form itself a certain trend whereby they will be interacting with each other. How elsewhere in the world this particular issue is being resolved? Of having access to this information, we should enable one to assess the technologies, the efficiency of technologies in different examples, amongst different patients with different comorbidities. How access to such big data is going to be regulated, which in the near future is going to emerge in all countries, including in Russia.
I think Russia has a unique opportunity as you start down this digital journey. And a number of my colleagues made this point about a central repository of data. You're at the design stage. You can learn from other countries, for example, like in Australia, like the UK. No system is perfect.
Or Sweden, for example.
Or Sweden, or the Nordics. So countries that have a similar healthcare system to what Russia has, to create the central database in order to be able to conduct the right analytics, monitor and track the efficiency, but more importantly, how will the government track to see whether they are indeed on track to achieve the 2024 goals? The only way, and that the investment that's being made is going to be a good return on investment. You need the data in order to be able to do it, but you have this opportunity from a design stage now to put that in place, working with platform companies.
Вы знаете, я немножко тогда конкретизирую вопрос.
Well, let me make my question more specific. At the stage of building this system and the framework that the Minister of Healthcare today is describing principally is relative to what you're saying. But the question is, when such a database is going to be made available, and will it include the maximum amount of data about different patients and technologies, how industries, how academicians, how the government will possess this, how access to it is going to be made available, because the industries will have to pay, R&D centers will have to pay. In what way? Is there any practical experience already available elsewhere in the world how this can be organized?
No, I just want to refer to the effort that the European Union is making on these regards. Maybe you are aware about the European Union working now in issuing guidance around electronic medical records, and one of our contributions as Johnson & Johnson in the consultation phase is the importance of interoperability. This coming from our experience in the US and in other geographies. It's not just the only solution, because a necessary requirement is interoperability, but it's not sufficient because you do need all the different stakeholders having the willingness to really share data. You need a regulatory framework, and yeah, you need that trust that we refer to before for everyone to really cooperate on that ecosystem. But I just wanted to point out on the importance of making sure that the systems speak to each other to really create that data lake.
Vladimir Anatolyevich.
Vladimir Anatolyevich. Yes, in fact, I absolutely support the idea that we somehow should have a single center and the information center, which in itself has the patient information about what was made available to the patient, and there are a lot of opportunities to use it. But first thing is we need to be able to learn to speak the same language. I mean, the global information systems need to learn to talk to each other in the single language. You don't have to read the same book all over again. Just the same language will be enough as a minimum. The reason I started talking about the system of medical insurance because historically the whole system of reference book was established, so all the information about different years are compatible with each other. This is just one of the examples of such a database. There is also such a thing as a collectible data, and there is also such a thing as an actionable data which may be necessary in order to make a decision. And it is important not to get drowned in gathering information which has a very narrow time-specific significance. And, gathering such information will require humongous amount of resources. And so to be able to collect something specific, which is very, specific to a situation or decision, the balance must be very, very precise, or such a system will end up being very expensive, very inert if you need to get information about everything and everyone. Dear colleagues, will there be any more questions? Well, if there are none, yes, go ahead. My name is, could you speak up, please? Can't hear what she's saying. Patience. All right, thank you very much. Once again, my name is Nino, and I've got the following question. What do you think? Would it make sense, apart from gathering data directly related to patients, to also collect data about the work done by the healthcare institutions? And if so, will we, within the next 5 years, be able to resolve the problem with authenticity of such data and with the transparency of various indicators that you would be able to gather this way? Well, in fact, our healthcare institutions do disclose an enormous amount of information about themselves. Sometimes it could be quite excessive administrative burden for them. But in the first place, I believe it is important, since we're talking about the value-based care, not to gather anything and whatever, but to do it openly and in a transparent way, to gather a certain set of results of the work done by a health institution. It doesn't matter, how much money they are being paid as a salary, hospital mortality, for example, is one of the examples. That is important, and that is a competitive factor. The only thing is that there could be hundreds and hundreds of such data points, and so it is also important to select a certain narrow of compatible points so that similar single-type institutions could be compared with each other. Otherwise, any consumer of such information will end up having a porridge in his mind without being able to sort anything out of it. So, to my mind, absolutely, to gather such information is necessary. But again, in the first place, this is something that is necessary for the patients and for the hospital institutions as a matter of transparency, as an additional competitive driver to become better than the hospital next door. It is also important. Can I ask you the following question, because I really have been having it on my mind for quite some time. You see, currently we are in the national project. We all are busy with oncology. We're trying to develop a system. The government allocates additional funding, etc., etc. Nevertheless, in this government system, system, let me describe it that way. We still have two systems in existence. We still have the so-called budget funding for the healthcare system and the budget healthcare, and the insurance funding that exists as part of the mandatory healthcare insurance. I think that you may tell us about what Moscow is planning to do about it, but by having two systems alongside each other, which should have different sources of funding and respectively do exist upon their alien, different information system, good or bad, that's what they are. And because of the fact that they absolutely don't cross paths, although in between themselves they're the same patients drifting. And if we talk about oncology today, and if we say that within the mandatory insurance system, a patient is well seen more or less, it is easy to comprehend where he or she moves. Then within the budget system of funding, regional system, we see a situation whereby regional authorities allocate different amount of pills, different quality of pills to patients. And that is why the accessibility of a drug treatment in an outpatient form is low and is not sufficiently controlled. So if we talk about the kind of track and path that an oncological patient is supposed to pass through, and if it is being monitored within the mandatory insurance system, outside of it, you don't see such a patient. So how you would think it is necessary to resolve the issue of affordability and accessibility of the oncological treatment for a patient in Moscow? Well, yes, first of all, effectively not really apart from the reimbursable drugs, practically everything you find in the mandatory insurance system. There are several points that I would like to touch upon. First of all, speaking about oncology, something that we're trying to do right now on the basis of the data that we have, to develop a certain system of risk assessment for certain patients and identifying certain groups for a purpose-specific screening. Once again, I should say that we are aware of every patient. It is important. It is important if we speak about the oncology program, because the whole issue is not from which pocket this or that healthcare aid is being funded. Next thing, right now as part of our individual monitoring amongst the patients who do fall under the mandatory insurance system to receive medical aid, this year we plan to also receive references to the electronic clinical record, as well as references to the indication lists for various drugs. They are well structured, and despite the fact that the system of medical insurance is not paying for these drugs, information for expert assessment is something that we will have nevertheless, and that is important. And I believe this is not the simplest step for us. So you are not administering pills, but you're controlling. Yes, as a minimum, we control indications, because prescription is part of the mandatory medical insurance systems. We do the screening of pharmaceutical products that I demonstrated to you on the screen. This is our digital pill box, which helps one to be aware of counterindications. And we do use the same kind of systems for quality expert, and as far as chemotherapy products are concerned, excessive indications, duplicating indications, indications not adequate to the gender or age of a patient. That is what we're using already. And I believe that in the course of this year, access to such data in as far as provision of pharmaceutical products in oncology will be able to achieve it in its full entirety. Well, dear colleagues, this is Moscow. We don't have any regions represented here, do we? The representative of the regional ministries of health. Well, I believe this is also a problem that we're all facing. This is a problem that the Ministry of Healthcare is actively thinking about, and the Federal Mandatory Medical Insurance Fund is thinking about how to implement it, because in order for this situation to be changed for the better, you understand that either the drug insurance you have to have, or the coverage that we are going to talk about tomorrow, these are the issues that invariably appear, and as soon as these issues appear, the kind of digitalization, the digital technologies that today we are talking about, these processes we won't be able to do without them. Well, dear colleagues, will there be any other questions? Because we need to wrap up. I would like to say that You have formulated for everybody the decision. So what's next? In Russia, we have solutions. If you want just a couple of minutes, I will tell you what is it all about. And we have prepared a proposal for the Ministry of Healthcare. We're ready to send it to you to establish the automated data management system. Oh, I'm sorry, but you see, the format of this roundtable doesn't allow us to listen to every proposal verbally. I personally, from the kind of position that I am having today, I would be more than eager to meet with you separately. And if we will see the possibility to implement this, it will be eager to take it further to the Ministry of Healthcare. You have the possibility to send a letter to the Ministry of Healthcare or to the organizer of the Gaidar Forum for next year so that they could allocate more time to your idea. Yes, we're ready to send it to you. It's already working in this country. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, there are no more questions, are there? Well then, with your permission, I believe I should conclude this roundtable. I mean to say that our today's meeting has demonstrated, at least to me, that was and that remains, that the digital technologies, they are innumerable, and it would be very difficult to classify them. That is a colossal, a great number of the objectives and goals that the people who work in the healthcare system have to achieve. So we will be witnessing an emergence of ever new number of solutions to the problems that previously were not resolvable to us either, or we couldn't have the faintest idea that they could somehow be resolved. Now the question that such solutions, such systemic approaches will be ever growing in numbers, and the system of healthcare must learn to assess them, to consume them, and introduce them. And here, unfortunately, there are no ready-made solutions. Nevertheless, I suppose that whatever we hear from our foreign colleagues and the kind of ideas that already effectively have been implemented, and quite possibly the solutions that they would be ready to share and to transfer into the Russian system of digital health that is currently being developed, I suppose that they would be of great interest to us, because indeed we have the possibility to create this system, taking into account all of the developments that exist elsewhere in the world, without having the obstacles that we currently see overseas as well. So on the one hand, we must be active and hungry for introducing such technologies. On the other hand, for their successful introduction, one needs to introduce a lot of changes into the legal environment which currently deters the introduction of such technologies. That is why I'm calling upon everyone not to stand still, think, and to propose and be active. And secondly, I hope that we all will be witnesses how this healthcare system in a few years' time will function in a very different way, with a much greater efficiency, I hope. Thanks, everybody who participated and accepted the invitation and spoke here, and to all those who were able to make it into this room. Thank you very much.